For those of you who don't know me, I am Wolf Bishop, and this is WordPress hosting Demystified. So, a little bit about myself first. I've been working with WordPress for about 13 years now, since mid-2005. I'm an avid WordPress educator. That's probably the thing I am most passionate about. I love to teach WordPress to anybody who will listen to what I have to say. I'm also the founder and CEO of WP Top Hat Incorporated. We are a WordPress maintenance and consultation company. We provide a wide range of WordPress services in addition to that. That's our primary thing. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I've got a 19-acre homestead in southeast Missouri where I love to go air gun hunting and ride my four-wheeler and forage and all that good stuff, anything I can do to be outside. I'm also an avid bicyclist, and I am a husband and father to an amazing wife and three equally amazing kids who together, the four of them are the light of my life and the reason for just about everything I do, so including this. So, all right, don't go too far. So what we're going to talk about today is WordPress hosting, different types that are available, why you might choose each type, and what the pros and cons of each one are. I am going to move a little fast because, like I said, we got started a little bit late, and every time I practice this session at home, it ran over, so I'm trying to get it down. All right, so first of all, hosting should be based on your needs, on the needs of your business, or even if you're doing personal sites. So there's some things that you should ask yourself and think about, take into consideration whenever you're choosing a hosting plan. What do you do? You know, are you looking at an informational site, an e-commerce site, a video streaming site? You know, what exactly do you do? What do you sell? What are your traffic expectations? Not just today, but a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. What do you expect to see your site do? How many unique visitors do you think you're going to get as a rough estimate? I know that's very difficult to tell, but there are ways and methods to help figure that out and come up with nice estimates. Traffic consistency. Do you expect to have periodic bursts of traffic? So where you're coming along, you might get a couple visits a day, and then you have some kind of sale or something that, you know, all of a sudden you're getting 300 visits a day. You know, how much support do you need? How much help are you going to need running your website and your web server? Because it's not just about choosing or running your website, but it's also about your server. How much control over your server do you need? How much support do you need with server-related issues? What is your skill level in WordPress as well as hosting? And what is your budget? How much can you afford to spend? All right. So we're going to talk about the five different main types of hosting. The first one is shared hosting. I'm saying that I'm doing this one first because it's the most common. It's the one that probably 75% of all websites out there are using, especially if you're, you know, a smaller site, a personal site, or even a small store. A lot of them use it. So shared hosting is basically a server with a lot of different people, a lot of different clients on it. They're all inside of the same operating system environment. And most of the time, a server has hundreds, sometimes even thousands of different customers on that server. And each of those customers may have one or more websites. So when you get down to it, it's not uncommon to see a single server with 10,000, 20,000, even 100,000 websites on it. So think of shared hosting like living in an apartment building. So you share the wall in an apartment building. You share your walls with all of your neighbors. You know, you can hear what's going on. If your neighbors are across the way fighting, you can hear it, and you know what's going on. You're directly affected by whatever's happening in the apartment next door to you. So some pros and cons of shared hosting. So despite all that, the effects from your neighbors, there are some pros to shared hosting. It is very, very cheap. I've seen shared hosting plans start as little as $1 a month, especially for an introductory rate, and they'll go up from there. It's very easy to set up. In fact, most of the setup is already done for you by your host. So your web host will set up your cPanel environment or whatever control panel they're using. And a lot of times they'll even pre-install WordPress for you if you want, even if it's not an actual WordPress plan. So getting started on it is really super simple. Almost all shared hosting plans include mail. So that means you can set up email accounts right there on your server quickly and easily. It's right there in your control panel to do. And another pro is unlimited bandwidth, storage, etc. Now, I'm going to contradict this being a pro because unlimited is somewhat of a misnomer. All right, there is no such thing in the hosting world as unlimited anything. A host it's simply a marketing term, right? So a host will tell you you have unlimited storage, you have unlimited bandwidth, but I guarantee you start using an exorbitant amount of storage or an exorbitant amount of bandwidth, your host is going to penalize you for that in one way or another. They may require you to upgrade, they may slow your site down, or even take your site completely offline. So there are limits to it, and you'll see a little bit more how this is illustrated once we get to VPS and dedicated type plans. Cons include it is less secure. Now again, I'm going to contradict this a little bit here. They do tend to be less secure still. However, in the last few years, shared hosts have made some really great strides in making their services much, much more secure. They've done really good at securing the server level a lot better. But there are certain things that even the host has very little control over securing, and that is things like the password that you as a user set on your cPanel, or the password that you set on your website, the usernames that you create on your website, which weak passwords by a user can be used as a backdoor to get into the server and cause havoc on everybody else. Support, let's face it, support with a shared hosting plan is usually subpar. There's a reason for that. So with support, when a shared host hires somebody to be a support agent, they don't really look to, and I know this for a fact because I've worked in the shared hosting industry, they don't really care all that much about your level of skill or your level of experience. You don't have to be an experienced web designer. You don't have to be experienced in hosting. You don't have to be experienced in any kind of programming or anything like that. You just have to have some customer service experience. That is like the number one requirement. What they're doing is they're hiring warm bodies to fill a seat. That's it, plain and simple. They're hiring warm bodies to fill a seat. Because if you get too complex of an issue, you just send it up to tier 2 or tier 3 support. Okay. And another reason support tends to lack is because in a shared support environment, you typically have a support agent handling multiple clients at exactly the same time. In other words, you go to a shared host and you open up a live chat, chances are that live chat agent is talking to you and 3, 4, 5, even 6 more people all at once. So what you get is either an agent screws up and cross-pollinates the chat, so they send something into your chat box that has absolutely nothing to do with your site. It's somebody else's. Or they're just so busy doing other chats that it takes them forever to respond to you. And either way, you end up with a very poor, very slow chat experience. There's a very slow, very poor chat. Can't even speak. Support experience. Another problem is noisy neighbor syndrome. So again, remember how I talked about it's like being in an apartment building? So if your neighbor or other people on the server are using a large amount of resources, or they're getting DDoSed or brute force attacked or anything of that sort, it's going to affect your website as well. It's going to slow you down, and it may take your site offline. Less scalable. So with a lot of types of hosting, with some of the others we're going to talk about, you can scale it without actually, and I'm not talking about changing from one plan to another. I'm talking about, okay, you need a little extra storage, or you need a little extra bandwidth to handle a sale or something. You know, with other types of hosting, you can very easily get that. You can very easily scale up to that. You're not going to be able to do that with a shared plan. A shared plan simply is not built to be able to do that. So the next type we're going to talk about is VPS. Now there's a couple of different types of VPS. There's managed and unmanaged. So let's start with the general definition of what a VPS is. So have any of you ever used like VirtualBox or VMware, anything of that like that? Okay. So basically what it is, it allows you to set up a virtual environment on your computer. Okay? So you can basically run multiple operating systems all at once. VPS is kind of the same thing. What they've got is they've got one physical server that has a different operating system for each client, for each customer. So you have your own version of Ubuntu or CentOS or whatever you choose, and you do get some choices there. So that's one of the pros we'll talk about. But you get more for your money. You get more bang for your buck because you are in control. You're in much more control over your server. You have much better access. You can install anything you want to virtually on your VPS, with some limitations, of course. But resources do appear to be more limited, but that's not actually the case when you think about it. So let's think of a typical base VPS plan. You might get a VPS that has, say, 4 gigabytes of RAM and 10 gigabytes of storage with maybe 300 megabytes or gigabytes of bandwidth a month. Okay. Now, you try using that. You max that out on your VPS. You're okay. All right. You're going to do all right. All right. Try using that much on a shared plan. I dare you, because I guarantee you, that is the point where you will reach, where your host says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You're using too much resources. We're going to slow your site down. We're going to throttle you. We're going to penalize you in some way, or we're going to charge you extra and make you upgrade it." You know, that is where that unlimited becomes not so unlimited. So you're on the same physical server, but you typically have less customers on a server, right? And you're isolated in your own virtual environment, so you're not as affected by your neighbors. It's like living in a townhouse. So you still share a wall with somebody, but that wall tends to be thicker, and you don't have as many people, so you're not surrounded on all sides by people. So you're a little less affected by what your neighbors are doing. So unmanaged is just what it sounds like. You basically have no support. You're on your own. You're running the server yourself. You are your system and server admin. Okay. You get full control. You get root access. You're free to install anything you want to, but support is limited specifically to hardware-related issues or server-specific issues. So let's say you have a problem with your hard drive. Your hard drive on your VPS crashes. Okay, they'll take care of that for you. They'll fix that. But you have a PHP problem, or an IonQ problem, or anything like that, or a mail server problem. You're on your own. You need to fix that yourself. You're not going to get support for that. They are very affordable. Pricing is very similar to shared plans. But again, like I said, because of the access that you get and the control that you get, it really works out pretty well. You have a minimal noisy neighbor risk, and they're very highly scalable. So if you need to add a gigabyte of RAM or 10 gigabytes of storage, usually it's a simple matter of purchasing that extra RAM and purchasing that extra storage. If any of you are familiar with DigitalOcean or RamNode or any of those Cloudways, that's basically what you're offered. You have an unmanaged server, and you have the ability to scale it up as you need it. And you can even scale up temporarily, and scale back down when you no longer need it. You don't typically get a control panel, so you won't get cPanel, you won't get Plesk or anything like this. You can add those yourself, but they're not going to be included with your server plan. Again, in this one, I struggle whether or not I should call this a con or a pro. You have finite resources. So in other words, you have a set defined amount of resources. You have 4 gigabytes of RAM, you have 10 gigabytes of storage, you have 300 gigabytes of bandwidth, and you can't exceed those under any circumstance. You cannot exceed those. But those resources, typically, you will not need to exceed those if you purchase the right kind of VPS plan in the first place. There is no email by default. So if you want email, you either have to use a third-party service or set up your own mail server. A managed is pretty much the exact same as an unmanaged. Gotta remember to do both of them. It's pretty much the exact same thing as an unmanaged plan. The big difference is in the level of support that you get. So you're still going to get relatively limited support, but those PHP issues I talked about, those mail server issues I talked about, they're going to help you with those. You're going to be able to get support from those things. Now you have a WordPress issue, they're not going to help you. You have a Joomla or any other kind of PHP platform, whatever software you're using, you have a problem with something like that, you're not going to get help for it. But server-related software, you're going to get help with. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. They do have a higher cost. They do, on average, I would say $50 and up. There are some that are cheaper. There are some that are much, much higher. But that's kind of a starting point. And other than that, they're pretty much exactly the same as a managed VPS. Now here is the granddaddy of all hosting plans. This is the dedicated hosting. This is essentially, you have your own computer, okay? This is your dedicated server, all right? So you have the whole server, you have all of the hardware to yourself. There is nobody else on that hardware but you, all right? That means you have absolute full control over that server. You install any operating system you want or have them install any operating system you want. You're at no risk at all of being affected by your neighbors because, well, you don't have any neighbors. It's like living in an off-grid homestead, okay? You can stand on your front porch and yell and scream all you want and nobody's gonna hear you because there's nobody there to hear you, you know? So your neighbors are not going to be able to affect you because you don't have any. Again, this comes at a much, much higher cost. The average dedicated server starting price is about $125. There are a few companies that do lower than that, but they are few and far between, and you should probably research them pretty closely to see if they're even worth it. And again, their support, you're pretty much getting no support unless you get a managed dedicated server, which is even higher in cost, obviously. If you get a managed dedicated server, again, you're going to get kind of this is almost identical to working with a VPS. So with an unmanaged VPS, you are restricted to hardware only. Same thing with the dedicated. With a managed VPS or a managed dedicated, you might get help with your PHP, your Nginx, your Apache, whatever, things like that. But again, that's where it's going to be limited to, and your support is going to be very limited. One of the most common complaints you hear with VPSs or dedicated, whether unmanaged or managed, is their support sucks. I call in, I can't get nothing. They don't do nothing for me. Well, duh. That's how it works. Okay, that is what you get. So if you can't afford to hire a system administrator or server admin, or you can't do it yourself, then these are not the right plans for you. That is just obvious. And again, with the dedicated, you have to fully configure this. Now, VPS comes with your base software usually installed on it. Okay, so you're going to get your bind and your Nginx web server or your Apache web server, whichever. You're going to get all that is going to be installed on a VPS. But a dedicated, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get any of that beyond your operating system itself. So they're going to install a very, very base operating system for you, and you must fully configure everything else. Your PHP version, your web server, the whole works. You're on your own. And trust me, from somebody who has done that many, many times, it is a lot of work. But it does have its benefits. All right, so the next and final and, in my opinion, greatest type that I'm going to talk about is WordPress hosting. WordPress hosting, often called managed hosting, is hosting that is specifically optimized to run WordPress. On WordPress host, you're not going to be able to run anything but WordPress. They won't allow it. You're not going to be able to run, SEO panel or Joomla or Drupal or anything else. It's WordPress and WordPress only. There are some common features with WordPress hosting that almost every WordPress host has in common. These are auto updates, security optimizations, the fact that you can only run WordPress, expert support, so support from people who actually know WordPress inside and out, and included backups as well as performance optimizations. This is not WordPress performance optimizations necessarily, but server optimizations. Now, I'm going to contradict myself again. I'm doing that a lot, ain't I? So, WordPress hosting is not the same as managed WordPress hosting. There's a common misconception. When you see something called WordPress hosting, you automatically assume that, okay, it's managed WordPress hosting. They are two entirely different beasts, two entirely different things. All right? The features, the level of management, and the quality of the hosting that you're going to get will vary widely between hosts. So not all WordPress hosting is truly managed. Some WordPress hosts are simply shared plans with a few optimizations. So a lot of your traditional shared hosts that you see, you'll go on a site, whether it be GoDaddy, HostGator, InMotion, whatever, and you'll see they have their regular plans and then they have WordPress plans, right? So what you get with those plans is essentially just some really, really, really basic features. You might get your automatic updates, you might get some backups included, you might get some things like that, but you're not going to get these things. You're not going to get expert support because those same agents on those plans who would help you on a normal shared plan, they're exactly the same agents. Okay, they have no more training than a regular shared plan host agent does. They're the exact same people. I guarantee you, if you get a GoDaddy WordPress plan and a GoDaddy shared plan, you may talk to the same agent. They have no more training, no more expertise. Either way, you're not going to get help with troubleshooting WordPress problems, and you're typically not going to have things like a CDN or caching included. SSL tends to be included on most of them. It's usually a Let's Encrypt SSL, which I have nothing bad to say about it. I love Let's Encrypt. I use them on all of my sites. So, but that's usually what you're limited to. That's where the buck stops, so to speak. Now, with a truly managed WordPress host, you get all of these things. You get support from somebody who really knows WordPress. For example, with my job at Pressable, I was vetted before I was hired. Okay, they give me long, vetting process of proving that I know WordPress. And that's what they do. Pretty much all of the managed WordPress hosts do that. These are people who know WordPress. They live it, they eat it, they breathe it. They are active members of the WordPress community. We're more in managed hosting. You're more likely to be able to get help troubleshooting your WordPress problems. So if you have a problem with a plugin or a theme, you're more likely to get some guidance on that. Now, there is a caveat to that. Don't expect, they're still not a development company. They're not your developer, they're not your designer. So they're not going to go in and modify CSS for you. They're not going to go in and fix an actual broken plugin. But what they're going to do is, here's a good way to compare it. Okay, call up a shared host and say, hey, I upgraded this theme and now my site won't load, I'm getting a 500 error. Shared host is going to say, well, you're going to have to call your theme developer. That's a WordPress problem. You're going to have to go somewhere else. All right. Managed host. Okay, let me get in there and take a look at that. I'm going to find out what the problem is. I may or may not fix it for you. But if I can't fix it for you, I'm going to tell you where to go to get it fixed. I'm going to give you guidance. I'm actually going to take the time to look at the problem for you. Okay? With a managed host, you're almost always going to get these features. CDN, server-side caching, and SSL. So, let's see how much time we got left. How are we doing? All right. Cool. All right, so which hosting should you use? So, I honestly believe that choosing your host is one of the biggest and most important decisions you can make before launching a website. because if you choose the wrong host, it can and will destroy your website or destroy your business, especially if your business is 100% online. So what do you think is going to happen if you have a website that you launch and it's down 30% of the time, 40% of the time, and people can't get to it, or the payment button doesn't work or something like that? You're going to lose business, and that means lost revenue, which is going to eventually destroy your business. So it is very, very important to choose a host based on your need and their reliability, their security, their stability, things of that sort. And you really need to research your host very, very closely. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at, again, at each type of hosting and what type of business or what scenarios it typically fits the best. So with a shared plan, I personally do not ever recommend a shared plan for business. Okay? Shared plans are awesome for personal sites, blogs, small blogs, things like that. I don't ever recommend them for business. More than anything, the biggest reason for that is because of security concerns. It is almost impossible to guarantee your security on a shared host because of the fact that you have to rely. It's kind of like when you're driving down the road. You have to drive for everybody else because some idiot driver pulls out in the middle of the road and you hit him. Guess what? You're out of luck, right? So it's kind of the same idea. If some fool on his website is blowing up resources with some stupid plugin or trying to live stream on a shared plan, because believe me, I've seen that and I've seen what it does to a shared server, then you're going to pay for that. It's going to affect your site negatively. So you can never, on a shared plan, isolate yourself from that in any way, shape, or form. It's just simply not possible. Okay? I don't recommend them for security, for e-commerce or any kind of site that collects personal data, because again, you're kind of at the vulnerability of other people on a server. Somebody else has a weak cPanel password. They use that pad, and that person gets hacked. Then the hacker is able to get a backdoor into the server through that person's cPanel. So that person in the beginning just puts your whole site at risk because they were not using best practice security. All right. So they're great for low-cost development environments. So if you're a developer or a designer, they are a really great tool to use for developing sites. Use them as staging because of the fact that you can often have unlimited sites. So, for $4 a month, I can get a shared plan and be staging 20, 30, 40 sites, no problem at all. Use that for my development, and it works out great. And granted, I prefer to use other tools, but that is one definite practice to them. All right, VPSs. VPSs are only good for those with system admin skills, or somebody with an sysadmin on staff, or the ability to hire somebody. Because of the fact that you're in full control and you're fully responsible for that server, you need to make sure that you have somebody who knows how to run it. They're a great choice for small or medium-sized business, e-commerce sites, nonprofits, anyone who needs extra security. If you need to run more than just WordPress, or if you're running a small live streaming or gaming or even any kind of high media intense website. They're really good because the amount of resources that you get are much, much better. And again, you have less people on the server, you have less effect, you have that isolated environment, so you're not as affected by everybody else. And you're not going to affect everybody else with your load. So what you can effectively stream, if you want to compare it, so if you run, say, an hour of live streaming every week, so you run a live podcast, right? Basically, a 4 gigabyte RAM, or 4 gigabyte RAM and 10 gigabyte storage server will almost always be perfect for that. I mean, it'll run it just fine, no problem. Now, if you do that on a shared plan, you're just that 1 hour a week. If you get 100 downloads every week, you're probably overloading your server. You're probably spiking the resources up sky high. So, and the more data you consume and the more streaming you do, the higher those resources are going to go. And you and everybody else on the server is going to be impacted by that. And dedicated. So dedicateds are primarily reserved for very large sites with large amounts of traffic. You know, the Walmarts, the Amazons, the eBays. Anybody who gets less than, say, 100,000 or even 200,000 visits a month probably is not going to really benefit too much from the cost of a dedicated server. I'm sorry, not per month, per day. You're probably not going to benefit too much from a dedicated server. If you're doing live streaming, constant live streaming, or gaming, again, very high media intensive sites, and you outgrow your VPS, then a dedicated plan is great. A lot of the news sites, a lot of the podcast sites that are very, very popular tend to run on dedicated because they can much more easily run and rely on the resources, because you got to figure you get a base level dedicated server, you've got 8 to 16 gigs of RAM, you've got anywhere between 250 gigabytes to a terabyte of storage, you've got probably at least a terabyte of bandwidth, you know, so you're going to be able to run things like this very, very well. Again, you're going to want to have an admin on staff. You know, somebody full-time. With a dedicated, you're definitely going to want to have somebody who's full-time system admin for you. All right, managed. Managed is great for anybody who's using just WordPress, does not see themselves needing to use anything else, any other kind of software, any custom code or anything of that sort. Customers that need advanced, okay, I cut that off for some reason. Customers that need advanced support. So you need specific WordPress specific support. You need help with managing your WordPress site, with managing your plugins and all that stuff, with managing your security, things like that is really great. One of the best uses for this type of hosting, however, is for agencies, designers, and developers, people who work with multiple WordPress websites. This is the reason, by the way, it's kind of by design. This is the reason, by the way, that most managed hosts are kind of built from the ground up for agencies and designers, because that's what they're best suited for. So what they are designed for is to take the headache away from you as a designer so that you can spend your time designing or developing. You don't have to worry about taking the time securing things with all of the security optimizations of your server. You don't have to worry about all the updates and configuring SSL and configuring a CDN and configuring your caching, because your managed host is going to do all that for you, so you can focus on what you do best. E-commerce sites run really, really well on managed plans, primarily because you've got WooCommerce, which is absolutely awesome for e-commerce sites, and it is designed to run on WordPress, so it works great. Any sites requiring enhanced security run really well on managed, because managed hosts spend so much time securing the server level that just about so like government sites, for example. Government sites tend to have very strict security requirements, right? And the security settings on most managed hosts meet or exceed those by default. There are some exceptions, obviously, but when you're running a site like that, you're usually on an agency or enterprise level plan, and chances are your host is going to be able to help you out on making it meet whatever it doesn't meet. That's another advantage to it, is because they will work with you if you're a bigger client, they will work with you to make sure that you meet whatever requirements are required of you. So picking a host. I'm not going to go through every one of these. I've got quite a few of them here. But these slides will be available on www.tophat.com tomorrow, so you can definitely look them over, and I do recommend you do so. But when you are researching a host, there are set of questions that I really feel that you should ask every time. Things that are really important to know about your host, and they will help you pick the host that is going to suit your business the best. You want to know things like, what kind of skills and expertise do your technicians have? How long have you been in business? What kind of support do you get, and how do I go about getting that support? How many customers are on a server? You know, what is your average uptime, and what is your uptime guarantee? That one is a good one because you want to know both of those things, because you want to know if they're meeting their uptime guarantee, first of all. So if you ask them, so what is your uptime guarantee? It's 99.99%. Okay, and what is your average uptime? 99.98%. Okay, well, you're not really meeting that, so you might want to move on, but or you might not. Just depends. But very important questions to answer or ask. You're going to want to know what the refund policy that way is. If you do the research and things don't work out, can you get your money back? Can you get any kind of help with that? Will they provide migrations for you? And what makes them different from their competitors? Why are you different? Why are you better? Why should I go with you over somebody else? So there are 3 keys to picking the right host. And we've kind of discussed all of these in one way or another throughout this talk, but I want to really stress these. Number 1, assess your business needs today. Okay, today, when you're buying a hosting, what do you need for your business? Sit down and come up with a realistic assessment of what you expect to see in traffic. What are you going to have on your site? How complex is your site going to be? Right. Estimate your business needs in 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years. Right. How much do you see your growth? Again, be realistic here. Do some market research, do some study, do your homework, and figure it out. What can you expect from a realistic standpoint in a year from now? Because you don't want to be buying a basic shared plan that you outgrow in a year, and now you've got all this data that you have to move over to another plan or to another host. You can do that, and if your business grows, you will have to do that from time to time. It's just part of a growing business. But you want to try to minimize that. So estimate your business needs throughout various periods of time. And research hosts potentially. Use reviews. Contact them and ask them these questions I talked about. Look at reviews, and don't just look at 1 or 2 reviews. Look at a lot of different reviews, because I've always said take reviews with a grain of salt, okay? Because anybody can write anything online. Try to find review sources that are known for not accepting payment for their reviews. They tend to be more honest. But just get a good amount of reviews this way, because even though you may have a few false reviews in there, you're going to have enough that you're going to see a pattern. You're going to see a trend for that particular host. And if that pattern is particularly good or particularly bad, that tells you a lot about that host. Stay in touch with my email, Facebook, everything like that. Don't hesitate to reach out.